this event this evening. For those who don't know, Kurdish Progress is an independent, non-partisan, non-profit organization set up in 2014, focusing on Kurdistan and Kurdish people both within the UK and abroad. Kurdish Progress aims to achieve greater awareness and understanding for the region and provides an open forum for political debates and economic social development in its endeavour to improve the position of the Kurdish people. I shall provide a brief outline of the events that occurred after the vote for independence, and will introduce the speakers to be followed by Q&As. On September 25th, 2017, over 3 million people in Kurdistan, region of Iraq, casted their ballots in an independence referendum, of which more than 92% of the voters opted independence from Iraq. The referendum took place despite threats from neighboring countries and pressures from the international community, which questioned the timing of the vote. The joy of the referendum was very short-lived for the Kurds. Immediately afterwards, on September 29th, the central government closed the airspace of Kurdistan's two main airports, Erbil International and Suleimania International Airport. The air blockade was followed by a military assault on the oil-rich city of Kirkuk, a disputed area claimed by both Erbil and Baghdad. Some are of the opinion that the Iraqi forces were able to take Kirkuk in a single day and with little fight, partly because it's a multi-ethnic city of Kurds, Turkmens and Arabs, and partly because the Kurds themselves were divided. The loss of Kirkuk means the loss of billions of dollars in export earnings that has flowed into Kurdish region from the sale of oil. Further controversy has been added to the situation due to the fact that the Iraqi operation supported by the Popular Mobilization Unit includes Iranian-backed militia group that has helped spread Tehran's influence in the Middle East, as well as the Kurdistan Regional Security Council statement that the Kurdish fighters were attacked by US military equipment, including Abraham tanks and HMVs. The Kurds might be of the opinion or under the impression that they finally gained international friends and allies, especially after all their efforts in fighting ISIS. Nonetheless, the aftermath of the referendum has stirred up the same question that the Kurds have been asking historically. Who are really friends of the Kurds besides the mountains? Furthermore, although the international community has called for a ceasefire and dialogue from both sides, the KRG has chosen to freeze the results of the referendum in a goodwill effort to encourage Baghdad to come to the negotiation table. Despite this act of goodwill from the KRG, the Iraqi Federal Court has recently ruled that the Kurdish independence referendum is unconstitutional and therefore its result null. Additionally, the Iraqi Prime Minister, Haidar al-Abadi, has warned the Kurdish regional government he will not wait long to take control of the Kurdistan's region's border crossings with Turkey and Iran, particularly the Fayash-Khaburz crossing, which has been under the control of the Kurds since 1992. The issue of control of the border crossing is of crucial importance for the KRG. The Fayash-Khaburz crossing is the site of the main oil export pipeline, and crude export through it are all principal sources of funds for the area. It will be very interesting to see what the fruits of labor will bring once the Iraqi central government and the KRG begin serious dialogue and negotiations on power sharing. I shall now move on and introduce the first speaker, which is Dr. Renad Mansour, an Academy Fellow at the Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House, previously a Fellow at Carnegie Middle East Center, a guest lecturer at LSE, Research Fellow at Cambridge University.
Thank you. And thanks for the introduction, because I'll speak about three issues, and I don't want to focus on the first one, because it's been overdone. I mean, I think it's quite clear the referendum was a miscalculation. And I think that's clear by all sides. But what I'll do is I'll talk slightly about why it was a miscalculation, but then focus on two other issues which I think are more important. One, what is the central government in Iraq? What is its stance? How is Abadi as a negotiator? And is he threatening to overplay his hand as well? And what risks there are there moving forward for negotiations between the Kurdistan region and the central government, the government of Iraq? And then The second part of the talk, which I'll do, is I'll look at kind of what I call a need to return to pragmatism, right? Unfortunately, and this is a very conservative kind of realpolitik thing to say, but human rights, humanity, these issues don't buy you land, don't give any sort of inches in world politics. And this is something the KRG actually understood very well previously, before the referendum, into how to use agency within the structures that the Kurds are unfortunately having to deal with every day. So first of all, yeah, the referendum has led to massive losses, right? In July 2014, the president of Kurdistan, Mansour went to Kirkuk and said, this is a historic day for Kurdistan. We will defend Kirkuk as Peshmergas. And there was this kind of feeling then, when the US was supporting the Kurds, that something was different, right? I remember speaking to several officials who work with Masoud Barzani, and them telling me that forget about 75, forget about betrayal. We're on the world stage now. People know what Kurdistan is. People know what the Peshmerga is. And that's true, right? However, what should have also been told to the president, and I think he was told to some extent, but he should have been told more from his advisors in the international community, is nobody wants this to happen. Figure another way. You have a bit of negotiating power. It's not like the US will move against you, because there's this other question as well, which is, would Kirkuk and the disputed territories have been retaken even without a referendum, right? Would the Iraqi government have taken them, would Abadi have taken them without a referendum? And that's a difficult question, right? Nobody knows. It's a counterfactual. But in any case, what is clear is that had the referendum been postponed, there would be more goodwill in negotiations, at least between the Kurdish leaders and the US and the international community. There was a deal offered, maybe too late, but a deal offered to kind of move in a different direction. Okay, so I think that's quite clear. In any case, moving forward, there is what's happening in Iraq today is Haider al-Abadi has evolved as who is perceived as a very strong leader rather than a weak leader. This morning, I saw an interview with Muqtada Sadr on TV, and Sadr said what Abadi is doing is great, and we should continue to have him there. The US, the UK, the world's governments around the world are supporting Abadi. They think Abadi is the key to A, rebuilding Iraq, but B, limiting Iranian influence, right? The first country that Abadi went to after the referendum wasn't Tehran, but it was Saudi Arabia. Then he went to Amman. Then he spoke to Turkey, and then he spoke to Iran, right? So there is this sense of Iraqi nationalism that we see amongst the protest movement in Baghdad and in other areas, where they say, Iran barra barra, right? So they do say, we want Iran out. The people don't want Iran. Just because they're both Shia doesn't mean that there is this connection. However, at the same time, it is true that Iran is the strongest and the smartest actor in Iraq, right, in terms of foreign actors. Iran has deeply penetrated the Iraqi state, the Ministry of Interior, and the Hashd, which are the militias that you referred to. Abadi is a tough negotiator. He believes in the state of Iraq. He doesn't believe in non-state actors, sub-state actors, taking resources or any other product of Iraq and selling them through informal markets or things that aren't part of the state. He believes in the centrality of the state, right? And that's important to note in negotiations. It bothered him. The entire de facto emergence of the Kurdistan region bothered him. And so it would be difficult to negotiate. However, he is being advised by the international community. He is also looking to make sure that Iran isn't completely taking over Iraq. And he's trying to grow, and we'll see next year there are elections coming up in Iraq, and we'll see how much power he can wield. To me, still, the biggest threat is more the Maliki side of politics. Maliki side of politics who actually threaten Abadi, right? It's true some people now, especially in the Kurdistan region, may see Abadi as being worse than Maliki, but I don't think that's true. Keep in mind that Maliki was the leader when a third of Iraqi territory was taken by ISIS because of his policies, right? It's been a difficult premiership for Abadi to try and fight against ISIS. He's not Maliki. And I think that's an important point to stress. But at the same time, he's very difficult to negotiate with, and unfortunately the Kurds have alienated themselves from the international community to try and deal with Abadi. But anyway, it's not a 75 moment, sorry, and there is a way to move forward. And what I think is that we need a return to what is pragmatism, the pragmatism that defined post-2003 Kurdistan region's policies. The pragmatism that says, okay, we're landlocked, we understand, new countries don't emerge, right? But rather than declaring a country, why don't we build a country, right? Why don't we build state institutions? How can you declare a country if your security apparatus isn't unified or under a monopoly, right? One of the standard definitions of what a state is, used by Weber, is a monopoly over legitimate violence, right? Why don't you pursue security sector reform and try and monopolize the legitimate violence under one leader so that something like Kirkuk doesn't happen? To me, that's how you build a state these days. And the Kurds could do that. They had an opportunity to do that, rather than just declaring independence. And that's more pragmatic. Secondly, because of the position of where the Kurdistan region is, diplomacy is vital, right? There's no way to otherwise to export resources. You need the borders, you need neighbors, you need ties, there needs to be ties with the neighbors. And so unilateral declarations that are opposed by all of the neighbors is economically unfeasible, as I'm sure Schwan will get into, knows much more than I do. So the point is to return back to what would be the pragmatism that has defined. And you're starting to see it, right? So for example, there was an article around the Fish Kabur crisis in the New York Times a few days ago. And really you have two kind of lines emerging, right? You had a quote from Mansour Barzani, right, who was on the line there, saying, "I will fight to the death," right? And in the same article, you have a quote from Safin Dezei, who is effectively representing the Prime Minister, Nijran Barzani, saying we need to diffuse tensions and we need to negotiate, right? So you're starting to see this tension between what is people who are like, okay, how can we move forward, versus people who are continuing to pursue, I'd say, more of a nationalist line. And my recommendation would be to perhaps realize the realities. And what's really interesting is, I spoke to a few Sunni Iraqis who said some of the mistakes that the Kurds were making, we used to make and we suffered from, right? Not having any politicians in Baghdad is not good if the Kurds are trying to increase their power, right? In 2005, you had Imam Jalal Talabani, you had Baram Saleh, you had Hoshar Zebari, you had strong Kurdish leaders who could affect the Iraqi state. And the 2005 constitution is a product of, the Kurdish efforts. By 2017, the only strong leader in the Iraqi government was Fuad Mahsoum, who's not a Politburo member of his own party, right? Boycotting the Iraqi government is not in the best interest of the Kurdistan region, as it needs to kind of build its state from the bottom up. And so, this is a step back, with what's happened, but it's not the end, and I think the Kurdish nationalist movement is still quite strong. And unfortunately, these are the circumstances and situations which really call for more pragmatism moving forward, and a way to kind of regain the power and autonomy vis-a-vis the Iraqi central government. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.